we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the third day of TestMu Conference 2024. We have got an important topic today that touches on critical aspect of development, accessibility. I'm Tejas Amle, product manager at Lambda Test, and your host for the session. Our upcoming session is titled as "Friends Don't Let Friends Ship Inaccessible Code. Learn how to improve accessibility of your app." If you haven't started accessibility testing yet, now is the perfect time to dive in. Accessible products don't just deliver better user experience, but they also help your company avoid legal risk. Today, we are going to explore an approach that blends intelligent guided tests, computer vision, and AI with human judgment. The combination can help prevent accessibility issues from reaching production and ensure that your code is clean and accessible for all the users. Our speaker for the session is someone who is deeply passionate about digital equality. Harris Schneiderman, Senior Product Manager of Axe Dev Tools at Deque, have been instrumental in building awesome web applications and contributing to numerous open source projects. We are excited to hear his insights today. Before we dive in, I'd like to remind everyone that there will be a Q&A session at the end of the talk, so keep your questions ready. And if you haven't already, but do share your favorite session or snippet from this session on social media with the hashtag as TestMeConference so that we can select winners and give away prizes. And if you are enjoying the session, don't forget to support with emojis. Your reaction helps keep the energy up and make experience even more interactive. Now over to you, Harris. You can take over.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, don't forget those emojis. Really important stuff. Um, yeah, so as Tejas was able to just introduce me, I did want to point out I have a shirt. I'm that dedicated. That happens to align with the name of this talk. Friends don't let friends ship inaccessible code. So I'm going to share my screen. We got a few slides today, and we also have some live demos, which I'm excited to give. Hopefully the demo gods are friendly to us and let me prove my points through wonderful demos that have no problems in them. I'm really living life on the wild side here. So I'm going to share my screen. Make sure I do it the right way. Entire screen. All right. So yeah, friends don't let friends ship inaccessible code. That's what we like saying here at Deque. Quick background on me. I work for Deque Systems. I've been a developer for over 10 years, focused on web accessibility. Although the last couple years I've focused on product management, which leaves me a lot less time to write code and a lot more time in meetings. But it's really cool to see kind of the flip side, being behind the scenes as a developer, and then on that same product, kind of becoming the product manager and hearing customer feedback. It's been really enlightening. It's really cool, change of horizon, but I still love writing code and try to do it as much as I can as my schedule permits and outside of work as well. I used to be a lot more involved in the ARIA working group, the W3C, so working on the spec. So I'm very familiar with core concepts in accessibility. Like I said, I've been focused on that pretty much my whole career. And so I'm really happy to share some of that information that I've acquired over the last decade, and hopefully give you some tricks and tips on how you can incorporate accessibility testing into your workflows as developers, as QA testers, as really anyone part of a development team. I think everything I'm covering today it will be applicable. I will cover some stuff that, of course, I'll be demoing Deque products, but a lot of the concepts are universal. I'm not trying to be a sleazy used car salesman. I will be talking about some free open source offerings, but I will also be covering some stuff that would fall into our pro plan. So I'll be sure to distinguish as I go through the demonstrations. Agenda, we're going to talk about accessibility testing approaches, kind of zoomed out, and a little bit of a quick intro to accessibility for those of you who are less familiar. I won't do a redundant or a talk that's been done before, but I do have a couple slides just to get us kind of framing in on web accessibility and what it is and who it impacts. Then we'll talk about automated accessibility testing in terms of linting, doing some automation testing in your browser. Front-end engineers are often going from their text editor where linting kind of comes into play. They'll move over into a browser window to test the code changes they just saved. Sometimes it's live reloading, but it's this kind of constant iterative approach that most front-end developers take between their IDE or their text editor and their browser before committing their changes, pushing it, and having their team review it. So we're going to talk about how we can get accessibility kind of baked into all the nooks and crannies of that process, including once I push that code to a pull request for my team to review, how we can incorporate accessibility testing into the CI/CD pipeline. I do also, of course, want to talk about AI. Who doesn't want to talk about AI at a conference these days? But really, this is I think interesting, and I'll bring something unique to the table because we'll be talking about human-centered AI as it relates to performing accessibility testing, and how we've incorporated that into our tooling, as far as the techniques we used in training models and how we've incorporated it into testing tools that allow you as the human tester to make some judgment calls that we would never want robots to make yet. We're still valuable. Our brains are still valuable for now and before the robot overlords take over. And then I'm going to talk about intelligent guided testing. And that's a perfect segue because intelligent guided testing is powered by AI. AI helps perform optimizations and making your guided testing easier. I'll talk about what guided testing means because it's not necessarily super obvious from the name, although I assume you have an idea that it's some kind of guided testing, kind of like TurboTax for accessibility testing. And then we'll put it all together with some demos. I'll make it make sense through examples if my words didn't do any of this justice. So what's web accessibility? 28.7% of adults in the US have some type of disability. That's some stats you can find on CDC's website somewhere. And there's this thing called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG or WCAG. People pronounce it differently. So some of you might have heard of WCAG. But really, it's a set of guidelines that helps inform us as web content authors how to ensure the things we create will be usable by all users of various abilities. And you might, if you have dove in a little deep, you might have come across this acronym called POUR, which is kind of a fundamental set of principles that WCAG is built upon. POUR stands for the following: perceivable, which means things you create are available to the senses, vision and hearing primarily, either through the browser or through assistive technologies, or AT. Assistive technologies are things like screen readers and screen enlargers and Dragon naturally speak, voice controlling, switches. There's a lot of different assistive technologies, Braille keyboards. And so you want to make sure that content is perceivable by those things or through sight or hearing. The second letter in the POUR acronym is operable, O, and that essentially covers that users can interact with all controls and interactive elements using either a mouse, keyboard, or an assistive device. Assistive device would be like the thing I just described, like a switch control for users with motor disabilities who can't use a keyboard and can't use a mouse. Third, we have U of understandable, which basically says content must be clear and limits confusion and ambiguity. Finally, we have robust, which is the fact that your web application or the software you're building, even if it's not on the web, is available and usable on a wide range of technologies, including old and new user agents or browsers, essentially, and assistive technologies. You don't want to build something that only works on one specific version of Chrome with one specific screen reader. Ideally, you want to make sure you're building something robust that works for all of your users. You don't want to alienate the Firefox users, let's say, or the users who are at companies in which browser updates don't come as frequently as us, out in the cloud world where we get automatic updates. So yeah, let's just make sure we're making a web that everyone can use and promoting digital equality. There's so much of our world that revolves around things on the web, filling out credit cards, booking flights, making purchases, just really vital things that we take for granted. Let's make sure that the stuff we create, we as dev team members building stuff that people use, let's make sure it's usable by everybody. So with that in mind, let's talk about accessibility testing approaches, because in order to do that, we need to test our application for accessibility. We could all become experts through years and years of studying WCAG through and through, but we're humans. We rely on third-party technologies like open source modules. We build, even if we have components, our building blocks are all accessible. When you piece them together to create composites, to create flows, you can't guarantee that everything is going to be accessible once you wire all your, even if there are fully accessible components, you'll need some testing in place to to prove that your code is, or that your UI, your UX is accessible to everybody. So let's talk about how we can get that testing incorporated into hopefully your whole company, all the dev teams across your whole company. So accessibility, at the end of the day, it's a transformation of mindset. It's a change that demands employees learn new ways of thinking, learn about different abilities, learn new skills, and kind of develop your own new and improved best practices when building web content. And if you don't manage this change, if you don't ensure that it's a change in which everybody is on board with, and has shifted their mindsets to, it won't really work. It won't stick. The results will be inconsistent. So on the screen, I have a kind of cartoonish graphic, almost looks like a comic book. And it's a guy saying, "Who wants change?" And there's a bunch of hands up saying, "Me, me, me, I want change." And then he actually says, "Who wants to change? Who wants to change?" And now there's no hands up and people have presumably run away. So people want change, but making those changes in your dev practices can come with a lot of resistance. Anything that will be perceived as pointless or it's not worth the extra effort, that can result in not full buy-in across the whole organization, which, like I said, can lead to inconsistencies and really a failed accessibility initiative. So like I said, we need to get all hands on deck for this to work. You need buy-in. Everyone has to be committed. It won't work otherwise. And that goes from the junior devs on your team, the interns, all the way up to the execs. They need to be invested in this. And so on the screen, I have a guy who looks distressed looking at his laptop. I used, I think, Leonardo AI to generate some of these images. I think I just typed in frustrated dev or something. But really, in terms of developers, getting buy-in from them, there's no force of influence greater for a developer as having them witness users struggling to use their software. It really does change their minds. I've been in that situation where I'm like, this thing we built is totally usable and makes sense. Our users are dumb if they don't get it. And then I sit in on some usability calls and I go, "Oh, yep, I get it now. That was a bad mistake. Say no more. Let's fix it." So I think this is even more true when these developers witness users who have a disability struggle to use their software. It feels bad. You feel like a terrible person, but that's not the goal, right? The goal is to just exemplify how users of different abilities interact with the stuff we're building, and seeing it firsthand and seeing people fail or struggle, or you didn't really have that perspective before. It really speaks volumes to developers and gets them gets their buy-in, gets their investment into accessibility. And if your company is starting to, like Teo said in the introduction, have fear of being sued, or maybe they're already part of some kind of litigation, that's no fun. That's a really stressful situation to be in, of course. But you'll see if you do start performing accessibility testing and maybe at all the wrong places, like once stuff's in production, you have QA look at it and then raise defects, you'll see that there's all this churn, this iteration, this actual wasted time on fixing accessibility defects. Whereas if you had accessibility baked in, everyone's in the same mindset, everyone's thinking about accessibility in even the design phase, or even just ticket refinement, just from requirements gathering, you won't have that same amount of defects. You won't be wasting time on accessibility regressions, because you put all these checks in place, automating where possible, supplementing that with AI and guided testing, and you're setting yourself up, your dev teams, for success to work on the important things, on those features that your app needs, and you're not spending time on entire sprints spiking through accessibility issues. So what we're really talking about is creating sustainable accessibility practices. Another AI generated images. In fact, I think one of the faces is all kind of deformed, which is a tell of, it's kind of skewed, I should say, which is a tell of AI generated images, but it's a dev team presumably putting their hands in the middle and giving each other high fives, because I have on the screen some text that says squad goals, set products up for success in the dev process. And by that, to reiterate what I just said, you got to integrate accessibility testing into every step that you see fit of the SDLC, or the software development lifecycle. You got to automate where possible. Devs love setting things up with automation. QA engineers, same thing. Let's automate what we can. Don't waste time on something that we can already automate. Let the robots do the thing. let the humans do their thing, and together we can create awesome software that's usable by everybody. You got to supplement the automation with that guided testing that I'll talk about here in a minute and actually show, and supplement the guided testing with AI. So automated accessibility testing, linting, scanning, and beyond. When we say linting, for those of you who aren't familiar, I imagine a lot of you are, but if you're not, it's okay. It's a pretty easy concept to grasp. If you have ever typed in a Word document or a Google Doc or any kind of editor that has spell check, you will have seen something that's very similar to linting. Spell check will render some kind of red squiggly line or warn you in some way, raise it to your attention that you've spelled something wrong, right? So same thing with linting. Generally, not non-accessibility specific linting, but linting in general is something that coders can use. A lot of times it's integrated into their IDE or into some kind of script that runs before they push their code, and it will check their code for common errors. Maybe they're using a misspelled variable name. Maybe they're referencing a function that hasn't been imported. There's a bunch of different things that linting can help you with and point out issues that will, if you're like a Java developer, result in compiling issues. If you're a JavaScript developer, will result in exceptions being thrown, all sorts of things. And so for linting, same concept, but really, or for accessibility linting, same concept, but really focus on accessibility. So if I'm typing some Vue or React or HTML code that would result in a definitive accessibility issue, like an anchor without text or a nested interactive element or a dialogue without an accessible name, accessibility linters can actually slap your wrist as a developer while you're typing that and remind you, hey, make sure you add some accessible text or some alt text to this image, or mark it as decorative if it's decorative. So we have a linter called Axe DevTools linter. It's a free thing you can use built into VS Code on the marketplace. You can install it, and it will provide all that kind of guidance for you. I'll do a demo here in a minute, and you can see, but it actually gives you kind of almost training content where it slaps your wrist. So it's great. You catch these issues before you even so much as save your file. But also for me, as someone who's been utilizing tools like this, my whole development career, it actually taught me a lot as I went. I'm someone who doesn't like making the same mistake twice. So all these accessibility automation solutions that I'll be talking about almost are disguised as a learning tool as well, which is kind of cool. Without you really trying, you end up grasping all these kind of complex accessibility topics and concepts. Of course, after the code changes have been made and saved in your text editor, you're often going to be going over to the browser if you're a front-end developer and running some tests. Or, if I'm building like a e-commerce checkout flow, I'm going to go and test the tweaks that I made. If I'm doing some color changes, I'm going to go over to the browser and make sure it looks like the wireframes that I was given. So you're inevitably going to be hanging out in the browser a lot, which is fun. A lot of times you're going to be opening up developer tools anyway, inspecting stuff, tweaking CSS declarations to see how the changes that you might make would look. And so while you're already in the browser, maybe even have developer tools open, pop open the Axe DevTools extension or a similar accessibility scanner and run that automated scan. It's so easy. You click a button and you get results within less than a second. It's not going to slow you down. It's just going to help you. If anything, it's going to save you tons of time. If you're shipping accessibility defects and have to go back and fix them later, why not fix them now? It's going to be way quicker. And your name won't be attached to a ticket that keeps getting reopened. So, and I'm actually going to show something that kind of comes before intelligent guided testing with AI that we have that's fully automated as well to analyze some of the more hard to find color contrast issues with text over images. So there's a lot of cool things you can do in the browser with an accessibility testing software. In this case, a browser extension. Moving on beyond the browser, once we're done testing our changes as a front-end engineer, you're going to probably maybe write some tests, update your end-to-end test suite with stuff that covers the new functionality you've added. And then you're going to say, hey, teammates, review my code in the form of this pull request. When I submit that code to be raised as a new pull request, we often have a bunch of scripts that get kicked off at that point. That's what we call continuous integration, continuous delivery pipelines. And you can integrate accessibility testing into those things like your unit tests, your end-to-end tests. On the screen, I have a kind of a graphic showing a screenshot essentially of a pull request in GitHub with a GitHub Actions bot leaving a comment saying this product found 26 accessibility issues in the PR and a link off to a full report. So you can actually do things like block pull requests from being merged if there are Axe issues found. A lot of cool stuff. Or you can be a little more lenient and let it pass, but make sure that it's triaged and prioritized from your backlog. Because remember, friends don't let friends ship inaccessible code. If you're setting your teammates up for success with these cool continuous integration checks, then you are being a great friend and not letting them ship accessibility defects. Okay, let's move on to AI, the hottest topic of the world right now. I feel like if you watch a football game, 90% of the commercials are going to be oriented around AI. So we're talking about computer vision and other things that we can do with accessibility testing software. So good input data is important. We have millions and millions of downloads of 𝐀𝐚𝐫𝐫𝐢𝐬, which is our open source accessibility rules engine. It's widely used, widely adopted. Chrome, the browser I'm using right now, has built-in Lighthouse accessibility checks, and they actually make use of 𝐀𝐚𝐫𝐫𝐢𝐬. So it's popular enough that Google recognized that and embedded it into their most popular browser. We also at Deque have decades, and I mean decades, I'm not just exaggerating, of manual assessments that have been performed. So we have millions and millions of data points of humans, really smart humans who know WCAG through and through, who are absolute accessibility experts or subject matter experts, as we call them. Those SMEs have been performing manual assessments for our customers for decades. And so we have all this awesome data that we've harvested to train our models. And our models are trained by humans with that input data, who will make corrections, who will say, hey, model, this thing is a button. This is what a button looks like. This is what a button often does. And we're training these models on modern web applications. It's not just some old table layout 90s web design that we're uploading screenshots of. We have real life data. We have a source of data that comes from all of you, the testers who use the X extension and who agree to allow us to use that data to train, of course. And so we have this powerful kind of ever-evolving model that helps us do things like you leverage AI predictions for role or purpose or intent of elements. And it allows a human tester in our software to verify stuff. So we're never going to do anything with our accessibility testing tools that would result in what we call a false positive, an issue that we raise that's not actually an issue. And you have to go, no, shut up, Axe, that's not real. Stop lying. And so we make sure that we're things that we think can help speed your testing process up. We present it to you, but ultimately you as a human make the judgment call. And like I said, I'm going to talk about this color contrast automated tool in a minute with a demo. So beyond automation, real quick, just an intro to intelligent guided testing, just for time's sake. I'm going to get to the demos right now. Intelligent guided testing is essentially a series of very simple questions that we ask you about your application. And without you really realizing, that's all leading us to help you raise and find some of the more complicated or hard to find accessibility defects in your application. So you don't need to know WCAG, you don't need to know anything about accessibility. We just ask you simple, oftentimes yes or no questions, or point and click and identify missing elements. And then at the end of it, you say, oh, cool, I got this report with some accessibility defects and I didn't have to learn WCAG. So with that, let's switch over to my fake application. It's demo time. I have a recipe app on the screen, and docked to the right side, I have my Axe DevTools browser extension. Let me just briefly describe the application. It's not that important what I'm testing, but I will be referencing the UI as we find accessibility issues. So I just want to cover that real quick. So we got a top bar with a couple nav items. Below that, we have kind of a hero banner with some statistics about the recipes, like how many eggs have been used or how many grease fires have been caused by making these recipes. And then below that, in the main content on the screen, we have what I'll refer to are recipe cards. Cards, often designers and front-end developers will grasp that. It's just like a component that is comprised of usually some kind of heading, some kind of body, and some kind of footer, and you repeat that for a lot of things. Like on an e-commerce site, a card would be used for like a product that you repeat, a product card that you populate with different types of products. So in this case, we populate with different recipes. We have like an image of the recipe. We have a edit pencil icon that will help you enable you to edit the recipe. We have a heading as part of that header, and it's actually overlaying the image. And behind the heading text, in this case, chocolate cake that I'm highlighting, there's this kind of translucent background that sits in between the image and the foreground text. There's a lot of colors at play, and I'm going to touch on that in a minute. In the main content of the recipe card, we have a breakdown table of the prep time, the cook time, and the difficulty. And then finally, in the footer of the card, we have a cook button, which will, when clicked, show kind of the read-only version of the recipe. And you can actually rate it once you've cooked it and tell our app whether or not you caused a grease fire while making this. And then, of course, below that, we have a full recipe breakdown table. But I'll cover these. I'll come back to these as we find accessibility accessibility issues with them. We have about 5 minutes to do some demos. Before I do this demo, I want to kind of move backwards, earlier on in the SDLC where I'm typing code, and this is the code base for this application. And I just want to quickly show what 𝐸 can do. I have it already installed. Like I said, it's available in the VS Code extension store. I can share a link with that during Q&A. But I'm going to start typing something like, let's just do a really simple example. Image source equals foo.png, close it out. 𝐸 goes, whoa, got a problem here. So it rendered a little squiggly line. And when I hover over it, got a tooltip that says ensures IMG elements have alternate text or a role of none or presentation. The reason it's saying that, which you can actually find out by clicking on this link here, it says image alt, which is like a help page to help you understand what that means. But the last part of role or none or presentation is a means of telling assistive technology, or telling the browser really, that this is a decorative image. I don't need an alt because it's actually not conveying anything meaningful. If it was conveying something meaningful, I could give it that meaningful alt text, and then that issue goes away. So linter can catch all sorts of things. I would love to be able to spend hours talking about all the cool things it can cover. It can actually cover custom components. I have Deque's pattern library, UI framework essentially imported here, and I can use custom components like our icon component. Remember, icon is a native HTML element, but we've provided 𝐸 a mapping of what some of our components mean and what they do and what kind of props they accept and how those props map to HTML elements and HTML attributes. So it knows that this uppercase B button component ends up rendering a button. And you'll see it says, hey, ensures buttons have discernible text. It actually knows that I have nothing but an icon component, and the icon itself does not have any accessible name. So the button it will be nameless. Assistive technology like screen readers will go up to, when focused on that button, will just say button blank. And blind users will have no idea what to do with that button. However, if I give it a label, which is not a standard HTML attribute, we will give that image an accessible text of foo, let's say, and then that issue goes away. It says, okay, you have a button now, and it will be, conveyed to screen readers as button foo. So there's a lot of stuff linter can do. I don't have enough time to cover all of that, but I just want to show what you can do in the browser with automated testing, taking automation, adding some AI, and taking it a step further beyond what automation can find with intelligent guided testing. So I just clicked full page scan. Within a matter of, 100 or 200 milliseconds, it found 18 issues. These issues can be broken down into a few different categories. Looks like we have color contrast issues in each of the card footer, those blue buttons that I said were the cook action. All of those have accessibility issues because the contrast ratio has not reached the minimum thresholds that WCAG needs us to be conformant with WCAG 2.1 AA. In other words, we need to probably darken that blue background to make it more usable by users with sight issues. Maybe they have color blindness and they won't be able to read the text in your button, and that can cause some issues, obviously. We also have a bunch of images without alt text. Same thing that we saw in linter. This is a cool example. What you can find with linting is a subset of what you can find in the browser. Linters don't have a privileged context where we've rendered our app with third-party CSS injected, with scripts that could be injected outside of the context of your component that manipulate your UI. So obviously, testing in a browser is going to be kind of the real deal, and you can catch a lot more stuff. But I want to focus on these 7 interesting issues. 𝐸 says, hey, I need more information about these 7. It looks like each of the recipe headings. Remember, I described that it's text overlaying a background image. You can only imagine how hard that's going to be to calculate contrast on, because it is probably hundreds of thousands of color combinations at play. So what I can do is leverage this computer vision AI-powered tool to automatically review those for me. It's actually a screenshot-based technology, and it will basically, for the developers in the audience, we just got back an array of those hundreds of thousands of color combinations and those ratios. We calculated color contrast ratios on each of them, and if every single color combination passes the minimum threshold with this computer vision-based technology, we have, in fact, identified that all 7 of those are not issues, in fact, and they have enough contrast. It's because of that translucent background. It darkens the image behind it enough where we have enough contrast with the white text. And I'm just about out of time, but let me run through one quick IGT, the table tool, and then I promise we'll leave a couple minutes for questions. Sorry, demos sometimes take longer, and the slides I was kind of blabbering on for too long. But I'm about to start a quick intelligent guided test to test a table on my page. And like I said, intelligent guided testing takes us beyond what automation can find currently into getting us a lot more coverage in terms of what we need to test for accessibility. So I just started the intelligent guided table test, and it is saying, hey, we found 9 tables on the page. Which one would you like to test? I'm going to choose the most interesting complex one on the page, which is the full recipe breakdown. I've selected that with this radio group. And then it's going to start asking me simple questions about it. It's asking me what type of data table this is. And if you don't know what that means, you should probably review the available options. It says, is it a table with 1 row of headers? Is it a table with 1 column of headers? Is it a table with 1 of each, a header row and a header column? Is it one of the more complicated tables with irregular headers or multi-level headers? In this case, I'm just going to say 1 row of headers. I have heard people say that maybe they think the recipe names here on this left column could be headers, but I think the way the intent behind this table, the way it's been styled, we're going to just say it's 1 row of headers. Again, could be up for debate, and you wouldn't be wrong if you disagreed. There's a lot of ways to code this. We just want to make sure that our table is accessible to all of our users. So it's doing some screenshots. It's doing a bunch of analysis. It's going to run some AI predictions. That's that role prediction I spoke of before. And right off the bat, we are testing our first cell, the first row, first column, and it's the name cell. And visually, for those of you who can't see, it's marked up different from the body of the table. It has a gray background. And our AI has done a bunch of heavy lifting for us, and it says, hey, we've identified this cell as a header cell. If this is correct, click this is not a data cell below. So let me show you what's happening under the hood. Each of these gray cells they're acting like in the tabular data relationship, they're acting like headers. But unfortunately, they're marked up with TD, which actually just means data cell, not table header. So our AI is correct in this case. I'm going to say this is not a data cell across this entire row. AI has done that work for us. And now we're finally to the first real data cell. And it's saying the name chocolate cake. We're onto the chocolate cake cell. And it's saying, hey, we think that this name header should be the header for this. And it's right. In fact, a new notice has popped up and it says, we think we know everything. It's basically gathered all the information it needs from me. And it says, if the rest of your table is the same and you're done testing all your headers with at least 1 cell, which we have done now because it has identified the right header, you can just click on done testing this table. So even with me talking and explaining things, it took us 2 minutes to find 7 issues, basically missing headers for each of the table headers in this table. So I'm done. We have to go on to questions because I've only left like a minute for that. I'm sorry, I wanted to show a couple more IGTs. This is free for you to trial. The extension's always free, but the intelligent guided test, you can start a 2-week trial and test it out and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to me ramble on about web accessibility. I appreciate you attending, and I hope this has been valuable.
Thank you so much, Harris, for your insightful session, and we learned a lot of things from your session too. There are so many questions that are waiting up for you, so let me just quickly go and pick some of these for you.
Sure.
Okay, so Prasant is asking, what unique challenges do mobile apps face regarding accessibility, and what are some key strategies to address these issues?
That's a really good question. I, just for transparency, am not a native mobile app developer. I leave that to our really skilled. We have a mobile dev tools product as well. I work on the website, but I do know a little bit about it, and I know some of the challenges. A lot of times, mobile was left in the dust in terms of advancements to accessibility standards. So WCAG, as you know, as you might have learned, that W is web, and that does not take into consideration native mobile apps. It considers mobile web, of course, and all the same concepts I just talked about apply to mobile web apps, obviously. And with developer tools, you can actually simulate devices and run that extension on mobile web apps just like that. But for native mobile apps, there's not a WCAG. There's not a whole lot of the similar advancements in terms of standards, but we do offer tooling to help you find accessibility issues in a very similar way that I just showed, but for native mobile apps. And so it's not some brand new thing. It helps you find things like that will cause problems with users with disabilities or screen reader users on native mobile apps, like empty buttons, which are really easy to do when you're building a mobile app. So the strategy to address these, I would say, is very, very universal to what I just talked about, which is get accessibility testing whether that is a combination of automated and manual testing, but get that incorporated into the mix for what mobile apps you're building. Because all the concepts I talk about, we're wasting time with accessibility regressions. That still applies to mobile apps. It's just you don't have a nice mobile version of WCAG to rely on, but there are tons of great resources out there on the internet of how you can actually build things accessibly. And Deque has authored a lot of interesting blog posts, and you can read documentation on our tools of what we're testing for, and that should help. That should go a long way.
Got it. Up next, so he's asking, what are the key accessibility guidelines that developers should follow to ensure their apps are inclusive?
Really good question. One thing I make heavy use of as a front-end engineer is ARIA authoring practicing guidelines. It's APG 2.0. And what that is a set of demo widgets and how to make those common widgets accessible. So if you're like building a new modal, let's say, and you want to make sure that your modal is accessible, which is probably one of the harder widgets to create in a completely accessible manner, we have an intelligent guided test that will help you test that, of course. But as far as like a free resource, APG or ARIA authoring practices, those will show you all the different checks that you need to perform while you're building it. Like you must trap focus within the modal. When the modal's open, you need to shift focus to the modal. You need to prevent screen readers from browsing outside the dialogue itself and getting behind that scrim, that content. When you dismiss the modal, focus needs to return to the trigger. So it kind of acts like a pseudo requirements document for you to follow as you're building it. So that's one huge thing I would suggest. I don't think reading through WCAG is the most beneficial thing for everybody. It's complicated. It's like almost intentionally vague. Sometimes I go and read it and I'm left more confused than I started. So if you have just utilize resources as in a targeted way, as targeted as possible. So don't like research like vague things. If you're building a mega menu, if you're building a combo box, look up accessible combo box blog posts, and actually the ARIA authoring practice has a good one too. Look at what's out there, maybe make use. I know Adobe open sourced a lot of cool React hooks that will help you build your own accessible components, but they do some of the harder business logic for you. So just try to make use of things that are out there already that either explain how to build the accessible thing or actually help you do it with actual code libraries.
Got it. So up next is, what are the most common accessibility issues that developers overlook when building application, and how can they be addressed? And to be honest, this is one of the major questions that even my developers ask me, that or it's very difficult to tell them that they should focus on accessibility issues. So yeah.
Yeah, I've actually probably covered the most common. Like I said, we have so much data. I can say that with certainty that the most common issue we'll encounter are luckily the easiest ones to fix. So color contrast is one of the top dogs, which I know it's easy to fix, but sometimes it's not that easy because designers will freak out on you if you change that branding, or marketing might be mad if you change that orange. But if the branding colors are setting you up for failure, you need to have a difficult conversation with marketing or the business. If you got light orange background with white text, or it's a color that's really hard to work with, you might want to talk to them about what changes you can make to maybe darken that shade. But most common issues, definitely color contrast. I think second most would be things like missing names or missing labels. So like social media icons, buttons or links in the footer. A lot of times they don't add alt text to those images, so it just shows up as a blank link, an empty link to screen readers, or form fields without labels. If you got a form, first name, last name, email, if you don't do the simple work of associating the label with the input, screen reader users won't know what's going on. They'll just hear edit text blank, edit text blank, edit text blank, and it's really difficult. And then they have to go out of their way to find that label, and it can sometimes get into a weird DOM order issue, and they really don't know how to fill out the form. And all those things I just covered are so easy. Color contrast, you got to change some colors. Like I said, it might be some difficult conversations. Empty buttons, empty links, so easy to just add some alt text or off-screen text or ideally visible text. That's really easy to fix. Form without labels, you add a for association and your issue's gone. So that's like the light at the end of the tunnel. Is a lot of the most common issues are so easy to just fix, and maybe next time you won't make the same mistake and you can just build it accessibly from the start, or maybe make a change to your pattern library to make sure that it's kind of required that you add that association. So I think those are kind of the top three that I would mention. And luckily, the hope that I'm offering you all is that they're really easy to fix, which is great.
Okay. One last question we'll take, and I think this will answer a lot of basics for everyone who is new to accessibility as well. What is the difference between, let's say, WCAG 2.1, AAA, and AA?
Great question. Yeah, it's not obvious by any means. It's not very descriptive. It's not very accessible, actually, if you ask me. But the difference is basically, just to put it in most basic terms, is strictness. A great example, just to keep the contrast train going, AA contrast would, for a certain size of text, would require it to be 3 to 1, whereas AAA would be like 4.5 to 1. Just an example. So you can think of it as an additional above and beyond what AA. So AA is like a subset. All the things that apply to AAA also will include AA, but AAA takes it a step further if you want to be really strict. And those color contrast rules, for example, or guidelines, make it, there's a lot less wiggle room. It needs to be very, very contrasty in your application. There's other things beyond contrast, obviously. That's just a good example, but you can think of it just as a different level of strictness.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much, Harris. Thank you so much for this session. I would also like to remind all the attendees that all of these sessions are recorded and will be available on LabNetTest YouTube channel. So you can go back and listen to them again and share with your peers. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Happy ability testing.